This is from Male Fantasies, Book 1, Chapter 1, Men and Women, page 42 of the book, and page 65 of the PDF available on monoscope.org. Visions. Captain Hans Rodenhelm in Erich Balla's Fighting Men, or Landsknecht Würden wir, is made to finish a glass of rum and fall asleep before the author allows him brief contact with a woman. The glass was empty, his head sank down onto his arm, and then the strangest of experiences. Was it reality or a vision? He never found out. A soft, comforting hand runs tenderly through his hair. A gentle voice caresses his ear. "Don't be sad anymore, big brother. Everything will be fine from now on. I'm here and I love you. I'll give you anything your heart desires. Just don't be sad anymore." An arm wraps itself around his neck, soft and warm. The drowsy sleeper feels the breath of a kiss at the back of his neck. He longs to spread open his arms and draw in the comforting happiness that surrounds him. But exhausted as he is, paralyzed in his astonishment, he cannot lift even a finger. "Stay with me," the voice goes on. Slowly, his rigid body begins to slacken. He raises his head, but blinded by the glare of the candle, quickly drops it back down again. When he looks up again in the shadow of the half-open door, he momentarily sees the daughter of the family with whom he is billeted. So clearly it can't be a dream. Her eyes are fixed on him with an expression of infinite love and sadness. She waves a hesitant goodbye, and then the door quietly closes. As he ponders that strange apparition, Holz comes to wake up. Holz is a man. His absolute matter-of-factness and sober pragmatism are infectious. Rodenheim feels sure of himself again. And it's good to know that my nerves are under control again. And so, farewell, sweet dream from a fairy tale land. I hear the call of men, and men are right to call when weapons are heard clashing in the land. The only part of the vision Rodenholm sees clearly is the woman leaving the room. To the apparition, moreover, he is big brother. One kind of door then is closed before she leaves the room. Yet he feels such a strong yearning for this sister-like woman that she must be made to appear in a vision. Albrecht, the hero of Franz Schwarwecker's The Nation Awakes, Aufbruch der Nation, does not shake his nocturnal visitor quite so easily. The night brought with it an oppressive, enervating presence. It crawled forth from the corner of the room, closed all the doors, and stayed with him until morning. The presence is a dancer. He dimly remembers meeting somewhere. She sings the same song over and over again. "Moon, from what paradise do you come on wings?" In the end, she looks at him, and he sees that she recognizes him too. In her glowing smile, quite silent, is a bewitching mixture of love, triumph, passion, and promise. She begins to laugh as she had sung, from somewhere deep in her throat, a warbling laugh, a tinkering bell announcing some celebration. He can contain himself no longer. He draws her close, for she belongs to him, and he cannot let her go. She does not offer the slightest resistance. Bending her body almost imperceptibly, she glides over to him. What else can she do? After all, she belongs to him, and her place is with him. They lie next to each other. She lifts her arms, and her dress slips off. Underneath it, she is naked. Her nakedness assaults him with a sudden glowing shudder, a gust of wind across a placid lake. He says nothing, but with a jolt his breath rushes into his blood, filling it with pure quivering bubbles, a gushing froth, just as the blood of men shot in the lungs leaves them lying yellow and silent like corpses, while the blood spurts endlessly, gurgling and seething at every breath which they heave up, groaning as if by a block and tackle. The air is so heavy and laden. From her nakedness and his own pearl-filled blood, he is drawn by some magnetism towards the blood of men shot in the lungs, an image from which he can scarcely tear himself away. In the end, he has recourse to some general reflections on love, through which he is able to approach her once more. The room is lit up with the whiteness of her skin, a light that is pale and velvety, suffused with the scent of linden and elder trees caught in a light rain. Her voice whispers and rustles among the leaves, where bees buzz with their burdens of honey and pollen. The distant rumble of the front is a constant background, an endless statico fire of cannon, firing loads of iron and powder, sending up smoke and noise. They collapse, still whispering, moving eyes and hands, groaning and groping. Then, suddenly, they are dead and silent where before they had been alive and screaming. There, there, she sighs into his ears. You're with me. It is only me here next to you. She is shocked by her own words, and her breathing becomes anxious. Has she said too much? Has she frightened him off? He doesn't respond. He's silent and unmoving. Swiftly, she raises her head and searches convulsively for his face. She wants to look at him, see his face. But before she can see him, he pushes her back, gently, irresistibly. She feels that gentle power as a knife thrust of horrible sweetness. She tries to fend it off, but can't. Dizzy with tenderness, she slides into a purple daze. Her head spins faster and faster. She tries to stop it, but she is grasping at moving walls of smooth crystal. She cannot get a grip. Yet she doesn't need to hold herself up. The dizzy motion carries her. With a long, flowing sigh, she lets herself drop into the swirling whirlpool. In an instant, it lifts her up and carries her away. He feels something overpowering, a cramp, a flaming essence of body and soul. It surrounds him like the scorching impact of fire out there in the trenches. It breaks over him and rises up within him. This glowing explosion, a fiery seed planted in his heart, a bursting star. Schauerker's text might help explain what it is that so regularly makes this desire, which begins by seeking satisfaction in woman as object, take flight before it achieves its goal, the affect displacing itself onto some other ideational representative. For Schauerker actually breaks free of that pattern, though not before he has reproduced it 3 times over. His first attempt leads only to a representation of men shot in the lungs, his second to the 2 of them lying dead and silent, the third to a knife thrust of horrible sweetness. Yet finally he reaches her, and she him, to dissolve in a swirling whirlpool and a glowing explosion. With these 2 experiences identical to the process of being surrounded by the scorching impact of fire out there in the trenches. These are not metaphors for orgasm. There is no transition. It is an ending, not tension and release, but tension and explosion. In Schauerker's vision, the scales are finally balanced between fear of and longing for that ending. Perhaps desire finally tips the scales here, whereas with other writers it might be anxiety. In all of these texts, could it be that the fear of dissolution through union with a woman actually causes desire to flee from its object, then transform itself into a representation of violence? Schauerker's text also gives some indication of the possible nature of the love object that is the target of his at once pleasure-seeking and anxiety-ridden desire. The fantasized object cannot clearly be distinguished from the fantasizer. She belongs to him. She seems to be a part of him. When she says, "You're with me, it's only me here next to you," she is shocked at herself, as if she has said too much. Are we dealing with a forbidden love object? Is she someone he is permitted to know, but must not be allowed to recognize? Spending the night in one room with her, he feels incarcerated. She is an enervating presence that crawled forth from the corner of her room. She closed all the doors and stayed with him until morning. There are echoes here of the descriptions and symbiotic relations with women in which the man feels trapped, and from which, under certain conditions, he never manages to free himself completely. Are the wives left nameless because they are somehow associated with the object of these visions? Is that why women aren't allowed to appear in clear, concrete form, leading lives of their own? Erasing the stain. General von Lettow-Vorbeck was once forced to defend himself against rumors that he was a ladies' man. The occasion was a sea voyage to join his troops in Africa. Prince Wilhelm of Sweden boarded with his retinue out to hunt lions in Kenya. My table mate was a Danish woman, Karen Dinsen. She was engaged to Baron Blixen Finnecke, another Swede who owned a coffee plantation in Kenya, and who intended to marry her when she arrived in Mombasa. We struck up a friendship. Her Somali servant boy Farah had traveled to Aden to meet her, and I presented him with a portrait of a horseman, instructing him to give it to his boss woman as a wedding gift. Inscribed up on it was the following well-known poem: "The greatest paradise on earth is found astride a horse's girth." or in the heath of a body, or at the breasts of a lady. She was an intelligent, highly cultured woman who was later to shoot a good number of lions. We corresponded up until the war. Again, the first striking feature of this passage is Letow's almost caricatural thoroughness in recording the names and origins of the people he meets on his voyage. In contrast to Letow's wife, even the Somali servant boy is honored with public recognition of his first name, Farah. Letow's attention to detail has two clear functions here. First, the woman comes from a respectable family and is therefore above suspicion. Second, she is much more of a boss than a woman, a fact which she proves by shooting a good number of lions. Her enjoyment of this explicitly male pastime leads Letow to remark that she is highly cultured. The notion of being cultured has close affective associations with shooting and fighting, both of which are also masculine categories. Yet the real key to this tale lies elsewhere. Years later, Letow reads the book Out of Africa. Its author is none other than that Danish woman, Karen Dennison. He notes that I too am mentioned in it. The inscription on the portrait is, however, misquoted. Dennison writes, "The greatest paradise on earth is astride a horse's girth, and the health of the body at the breast of a lady." I found this a little hard to swallow. It moved me to renew my contact with her. We laughed long and loud about her German. The idea that someone he knew might read Dennison's book and gain a false impression of his sexual outlook, or perhaps even his sexual behavior overseas, apparently haunted Letow until he received written confirmation from Dennison that this Danish German was not penned by him. His letter could then be produced as evidence in situations of potential embarrassment. There is more in play here than a simple prudishness or questions of morality. You're dealing with the warding off of a threat. In an account of his days in the army, Lieutenant Earhart recounts how he once succeeded in exposing a navigation officer who pretended to be a paragon of virtue. Sailing along in a boat one night, we were shooting birds in the moonlight, it's in parentheses, he spots the noble paragon in another boat with a Swedish girl. From that point on, his reputation was ruined, he writes, adding that some have a passion for hunting and others for other things. If the episode was humiliating for the other man, for Earhart it is a tale of triumphant revenge. As a high school student, Earhart had been interested in photography. His habit of proudly showing young women around his darkroom gave rise to certain rumors. When one of Earhart's teachers suggested in front of the class that there might be some connection between these darkroom visits and Earhart's failure to learn his vocabulary, the young man struck him. He was expelled from the school. The fact that his father, a strict pastor, approved his son's behavior in this instance shows how monstrous the reproach must have seemed. To return to Letow and his concern for his public image, on a visit to his brother and sister-in-laws in Flensburg when he was about 50 years old and at the height of his renown, an extraordinary sight meets his eyes. Behind a row of young ladies dressed in white, he spots a sign that reads, "Mate with Letow Vorbach," for 20 cents. He completely loses his composure. Perturbed as he is, he sits through the speeches of welcome without hearing a single word. When it is over, he is relieved to learn from his sister-in-law that his stepdaughter is the author of this notice. So much does she admire him that she has named her Buck Rabbit, Letow Vorbach, and is now peddling its prowess to interested rabbit keepers at 20 cents a head. The general is staggered to think that his potency might be traded on the open market and at bargain basement prices. He calls it the most perverse experience of my entire life. Dwinger, meanwhile, invents the character Feinholz to represent the stain men pick up from running after women. Feinholz is no regulation soldier. Through his job is to look after the horses. He is something of a jack of all trades. Feinholz's true forte, however, is spying on the Reds. He is constantly chasing women, but somehow never catches them. He toddled off toward the stables, but not without first stopping in the chicken yard. There he saw a bright pleated skirt flapping in the wind. Soon enough his comrades heard him happily crowing. Dwinger makes him into a big baby who crows at the sight of a woman's skirt, and who